Sarah Brady, welcome to the Soccer Queens podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me on. I'm looking forward to speaking with you and hopefully help the listeners out.
This is going to be a blast, and I'm sure everyone's like already captivated by your accent. So they're like
Yeah,
leaning in. They're like, "Oh, what does she have to say?"
everyone loves a Scouser. That's the motto that I'm going with. Hopefully, I'll be one that you'll love.
Well, let's just have a brief intro and where your playing journey took you and what you're up to today with coaching.
Yeah, well, I landed on these shores 14 years ago because I couldn't play anymore. I was one of those young athletes whose body was not capable of carrying the brain for the sport. So unfortunately, when you look back now at all the research and all the awareness that we acquire as we get more experience in the game, there was no intent to hurt or to harm me as a young player, but no one stopped me. I played every single day. There was no periodization. I very frequently played three full games in one day, three 90-minute games on 11v11 pitches. And it was just, there's a passionate kid, let her go. And I'm not unique there. There's plenty who've gone through the same journey as me. I think, one thing that blows people's minds when I tell people in the US, we go to high school at 11. So you play in the U16 team at 11 years old. And as you can imagine, it's a physical struggle. So I probably played too much football for my physical maturation, and there was no 5-10 month season. It was every day, formally and informally. So unfortunately my body kind of clapped out on me. But the positive was, my coaches wanted to keep me integrated in the club. They said, like, it's too much enthusiasm to let go. So they let me start coaching the younger ones, and I got really into warm-ups for some reason. They were like, bring Sarah in. I think it started off as like more of an enthusiasm thing. But I got really into warm-ups and really fascinated, and that led to a degree in sport and exercise science, a master's in coaching education. So it's funny, like the smallest things, how they compound. But yeah, I came over here 14 years ago, landed in New Jersey. I'm a big fan of New Jersey. A lot of people raise their eyebrows, but I actually really liked it. So I've done everything from tying the shoelaces of 2 and 3 year olds all the way up through the college game and everything in between. So the experience that I've been able to accumulate in America has been unbelievable, because there's so much opportunity here. And if you work hard and you connect with the right people, you can kind of ascend and work across a lot of different age brackets, which has been fantastic. I've took something from everything I've done. But now I'm actually not directly on the pitches for the first time in 14 years. I actually work at USL head office down here in Tampa. My day-to-day primary responsibilities are to build out the girls academy, and then obviously connect those young players with opportunities in the pre-professional women's space. So it's new, it's exciting, it's dynamic. But I keep myself on the fields. I volunteer at the local club with the U11 girls. So there's still some shoelaces that need tying, and I'm happy to do it.
I love that. And you have just such a wide range of experience working with all the different age groups and levels. And for the listeners, which club teams were you involved with, and which colleges leading up before USL?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot. One thing that kind of is a bit different in the US is when you're, from another country, you move with your visa. So I've gone from East Coast to West Coast. I've basically done New Jersey, New York, PA, Connecticut, across to Maryland, Virginia. So too many clubs to name. The club I was at previously to the USL was AC Connecticut. They were a USL club. So the USL were able to see me kind of work. I was the academy director and the girls academy head coach, and then I actually coached the W League team in the summer. So that was the previous one. And honestly, that's the best and the worst thing about coming over as a non-citizen. You just have to go wherever the visa is. But now I'm good. I can choose where I go. So I'm choosing to be in Tampa.
I'm glad, because we're right next to each other, and that's how we got connected. We're like 20 minutes down the street. So I'm glad you're here and you're here to stay for a while.
Thank
What
you.
would you say are like the biggest differences between soccer here as opposed to where you were previously across the pond?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of differences, mostly cultural. I think the actual game itself is a little bit slower. less emphasis on the physical element, more on the tactical and the technical element. Although that gap is closing, obviously with funding and kind of support going into girls' academies at home, there is a little bit more of an S&C component. Our strength and conditioning component when I played, which was a long time ago, was literally run around the pitch until you can't. That was our fitness training. But now, there is experts who are designing the periodization of our elite talent, which is great. The US game is a little bit more transitional. I think we can see that from the elite levels in the women's game all the way down to the ECNL level. The game is very much about score and score as quickly as you can. It's not so much about managing the game. Some clubs are getting there and some clubs are emphasizing that. But I think the biggest difference for me is kind of how we measure success. So I mentioned earlier that I played 3 games a day. So I played 12s, 14s, and 16s in the same day. And it was a big honor to play an age group up. Like if you were doing well, you played the age group up. If you're doing really well, you played 2 age groups up. And in America, I think what we do is we keep the player at their age group to win and to win a championship where, the long-term player development kind of doesn't get prioritized. Hopefully we're going to change that a little bit with the USL Academy because, the whole point of our model is put your best talent together from 15 to 19 and create a super team. But yeah, I think it is changing, but there's still the biggest differences. The reward for being a top young prospect is to move up the age groups and struggle and, not be the best player. Whereas, the US, they stay in their own age group. You are the best player and you're celebrated for who you are right now. We have the Gatorade High School Player of the Year. Like in England, we kind of laugh at that a little bit because we're like, it doesn't matter how good you are at 16, can you make it to the first team? So not to knock any of these awards, obviously they're culturally very appropriate and they mean a lot and they're earned by the players who earn them, which is great, but we just take a little bit more of a long-term view. The whole point is to get a youth talent into the senior level.
I love that. And one thing you mentioned there is the physical side of the game, and obviously teams in Europe and across the pond are starting to get more of that performance training, which is great to keep our girls healthy and playing at a high level. And one thing I like about you is you're just so passionate about learning, and I think more coaches need to really grab onto that education and performance. And you've talked a lot about incorporating this type of training into your practices in warm-ups or at the end, and making sure that you're checking all the boxes and having time for technical and tactical work. So what are you currently doing in terms of performance?
Yeah, so as I say, right now I'm just working with the babies, the U11s, and the physical ABCs are the most important things. Your agility, your balance, and your coordination. We did a session last night on finishing, and what we try and do is we try and just address the physical components. So, okay, everyone knows the technical and tactical. You can Google them, you can go on YouTube. They're the things that we teach at our courses. But we start to talk to the kids about the physical elements. Shooting and football specifically is a single leg sport. It's a unilateral sport. So we were talking to the kids about the importance of balance. And your stand and foot is not just to aim the ball. It's not just to lock your hips in place. Although it is. It's also because if we can get stability, we can get more. We can generate more power, and the stability comes from that single leg balance. So we're trying to introduce it with the little ones, and we do it from the warm up. So we've got them kind of, doing bounds, lateral bounds. We've got them doing kind of, my favorite thing to do with young female players is actually decelerations. They're very good at accelerating, not so good at decelerating. And if we look at the research, the lack of eccentric strength and deceleration is actually what's causing the injuries. So we're just trying to set good habits right now with little ones. Obviously, we're not massively emphasizing the physical training piece. We're just trying to give them training habits. So we have some fun games. We play a game called fingertip fencing. So, the British sword fencing. So we stand on one leg and they're allowed to poke each other from close range with 2 fingers at a time. And whoever puts the second leg down, that's a loss. So obviously they can't shove each other. You're not allowed to hop around. You have to stay on that single leg, but we're getting disturbed. Our core stability has to be engaged, and it's good fun. We try and make it fun at this age because they're not going to understand the why we're doing it. They're actually not going to care that much about the why. But I think it's just setting those good habits, and I think incorporating strength and conditioning is the most important thing, not making it a separate thing. We're playing a physical sport with a physical body. So, yes, make it fun, but, make it relevant. Single leg stability work is the big emphasis right now in what I'm trying to teach the little ones.
I love that, and it's so valuable for the little ones too because it seems that they're getting under that specialized year-round model more, so
Yeah.
it becomes more important for coaches to incorporate this stuff within practice because a lot of them aren't seeing a performance coach or doing this strength stuff outside of that, and it's like practice, 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 soccer year round, and if the coach is doing it, then that's only benefiting them. Do you think this is going to become more common with coaches kind of acting as the performance coach?
I would like to think that the best thing about America for me is the fact that people are willing to be a little bit more interdisciplinary. Can't even say the word. In England, we specialize. I am the football coach. I send you to the S&C coach, and then I send you to the performance psychologist over there, and we're all separate, but we all talk. But I think what America does a really good job of is coach a little bit more holistically. And the first step is understanding all the different parts of what the player needs, right? We're going to have a very different psychological approach with the little ones. It's more about building their confidence. It's you want them to speak and answer questions even if they answered incorrectly. So it's always like, I like that. I wasn't thinking that one, but thank you. That's a good one. Ask the question a different way. So you want to keep them engaged and kind of building their confidence. But I think specifically to the physical piece, I think it's our responsibility to learn about that. It's not delivered all the time directly on our licenses. I think it's just, a coach is a curious mind for me. You should always be looking to expand. I'm not a technology person, but I'm starting to expand a little bit more into data. If I ever needed someone to do it properly, I'd, pay someone or I partner with someone to do that. But a genuine awareness and appreciation of everything that's going to help a player is important. So yeah, the physical piece, I think what I've seen at clubs is as they get older, as they're hitting that kind of physical maturation, usually around 15, they're starting to include one session a week. So they'll take maybe a football session out and then they'll add an S&C. I think there's value to that, but I also don't think it's absolutely necessary. I think you can incorporate it in line with tactical periodization. You can teach every element of the game within the training session. Obviously, you can't bring barbells out onto football pitches. That's not going to be great, but that's not necessarily what S&C has to be. But I do believe that the little ones, if we get their foundation right, because unfortunately the schools are not teaching as much PE anymore or encouraging as much recess. So I do think we have that responsibility and start small. I've seen a lot of clubs like little kids will start wearing the bands now, and they'll be doing a warm up with the bands. It's a great place to start. You don't have to be an expert to get started, but I do think if you want to learn more and you're not really sure where to go, places like your podcast, I think are amazing because, you're offering information for free. There's too many barriers to learning in the world and especially this country. Everything has to be paid for. And I just think there's people out there who have the knowledge, who have experience and they want to share it. And that, that's one of the main things that, what we connected over and what I really value about what you're trying to do. You're trying to help. You can monetize certain elements because, you're an expert and you got to make a living. But, the real value is sharing what you have because, that's going to come back in a big way, right?
And that's exactly why the podcast exists because I like talking to coaches like you who are experts and who have insights to share that everyone can learn from. And like selfishly, I like to learn too. And I hope the guest learns as well. But it's just so nice to have that access to the education. And you're right. I think it is hard for coaches to get it in certain courses, and I'm having flashbacks to like taking my C license, and I remember when I paid for it at the time I was like, "Oh man, that was a big expense." And it's like the coaching licenses here just keep going up and up. So I don't know what your thoughts on that are, but it's just it's a big barrier for sure.
I mean, I understand. Like, that's the thing. I think when you kind of get a bit more experienced in different areas, like I completely understand why there is high cost to education, formal education, I do understand it. However, I think there is, to use the word the kids use, you can hack it. You can hack around it. You know, I've been very fortunate that I've been able to access formal education both academically and in, you know, the coaching, football specific coaching. But I'm not everybody, but I've got this privilege of being able to access it. Now, the real power in acquiring that knowledge is to share it, in my opinion. So I'm always looking to, you know, engage in discussion. Like, an expert for me is not someone who tells you, it's someone who discusses things with you. So I'm always very open to, if you want to talk to me about something, if you think I'm an expert, I'm flattered, but I bet you I'll learn something from you as well. And I'm also just a big fan of, it's got to be digestible knowledge. I don't want to come in here with big words and people go, oh, that's not accessible, it's not digestible. The whole point of acquiring knowledge is to be able to apply it. So we need to make sure that whoever we're speaking to, they go away from that conversation with confidence that they can apply it. So yeah, it's a little bit of a different mindset. European culture is a little bit more sharing. From my experience, America tends to be a little bit more, this is my knowledge, I'll share it with you for $1,000. You know, so and you know, everyone's allowed to do what they want. I just choose to take the path of, you know, I'm happy to share information. I don't want to put barriers in place that mean that certain people are not able to access it.
Mhm. So let's shift to tactical periodization for some more education and discussion.
Yeah.
But what do you do as far as tactical periodization, or what do you suggest coaches do? Because you mentioned earlier that you used to be playing 3 games in a day, and I like to think that most coaches have moved away from that and we're a little bit smarter at this point. But, you know, there's some
Yeah.
people who still don't know what tactical periodization is, how to change load based on the day or how many games are coming up that weekend. So just provide some of your insights.
Yeah, I think, you know, tactical periodization was, you know, it's been around forever, but it's been coined, you know, tactical periodization in the 80s in Portugal. So, you know, you're big proponents of it, you know, Mourinho, when he kind of, everyone started to love Mourinho, you know, oh, this is a new thing. It's not. It's, you know, science informed training. So all periodization means is organization of training. And the idea is for soccer is to peak on the game day. You know, there's various research out there that says, you know, it takes between 72 and 96 hours plus or minus, you know, a day to fully recover from the game. Obviously, there's a lot that goes into that because we have to remember we're coaching individuals and we're training individuals. Yes, they're in a team format. You know, but some people have different, you know, physical makeup. I'm more mesomorphic, so I'm kind of heavier in muscle. So it takes me longer to recover from a game of football because I'm not, you know, my aerobic system and my conditioning system is not as good as my strength systems. So you have to kind of understand that these are general guidelines, but they always need to be applied to the individual you've got. So one of the big things with periodization is it's just understanding that you can't separate the body and the mind, right? So we focus as the game as the central piece of the training. You know, so we want to make sure that the game and the decision making elements within the game and the actions and the movements within a game are what we're training. So it's very holistic, which I love about tactical periodization, and it brings everything together in every session rather than, oh, this session we're going to just do technical, because a lot of our coaches in this country right now, they're used to going, okay, we do tactical on Tuesday. On Thursday, we'll work on kind of game tactics, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a different way to organize training. I think the most difficult thing about tactical periodization's implementation, I think, in the US model is there's too many games. You know, we're not prioritizing training. You know, even these little, you know, babies that I'm coaching, they play Saturday, Sunday every week. They train twice a week and they play twice a week. So tactical periodization, it needs to be, again, going back to knowledge is only good if we can apply it. You know, tactical periodization is mainly like if you're training 4 times a week or you have a full week cycle with these people, you have 1 game a week and we can peak at that. So I think, you know, the practical application of it is literally integrated training. Can we train technique and decision making and the physical elements and the psychological elements all together? And the answer is yes, we can, but it's got to be age appropriate, and it's also got to be ability and individual appropriate. So there's a lot of factors, and I think coaches know their own teams better than anybody. Start there, right? Start with who your kids are and what they need, or who your players are and what they need, and then start to understand. Right, I've got 2 training sessions this week, but there's 2 training sessions within a 20-week model. So plan your sessions across the 20 weeks instead of, oh, on Sunday we did this not very good, and kind of doing that reactive coaching. I think I would always encourage a coach to start the season with a 20-week plan, and you can tweak it and you can change it. But if you have certain principles and sub principles that you want those players to be able to acquire over the season, plan it over 20 weeks, not over 1 and 2. Yes, there can be some blocks in there. You can say, okay, 20 weeks, the first 4 weeks, we're just doing this. That's fine as long as it fits into, the big picture, the collective of what you're trying to do, and it obviously fits the game model. So I actually think the best thing to do is if our club directors are quasi prescribing that, there has to be expectations at club level on what they want certain age groups to be able to do essentially at the end of your training cycles. But then I do think there needs to be, the coach leads the team. I think the coach has to have some form of flexibility in there. So, tactical periodization for little kids who are training, twice a week. You want to make sure that, there's an emphasis on speed, right? Speed of thought, decision making, and speed of, the physical body. I think, yes, strength, but different strength. I think you can train strength with smaller pitch sizes where there's going to be more contact and, there's more rest periods. I think that's one of the things that we forget. If we're training strength, we need long rest periods. So those sessions tend to be a little slower. So maybe that happens earlier in the week. Speed, you want that close to the game, right? Short, sharp, shorter sessions. Really acute detail in what you're demanding, because you want them to carry that into the game. So again, if we're looking at training week to week, I think we're limiting ourselves a lot. If we look at our full training opportunity, and that's when we can really plan a full periodization and better understand everything we can get through in a season. And this reactive coaching, I understand where it comes from, because there's a lot of pressure on parents for results. I think we've got to get away from that. And I think if we can have strong club leadership who start seasons off with a quasi-prescription, a semi-prescription, we educate our parents on what we're trying to achieve this season, and then every single game we pull it back. So that's where I'm lucky that the coach that I co-coach with, she's phenomenal at the expectation. If we win the game, she's like, okay, did we achieve what we set out to achieve? She basically, this was our periodization for the season. These are the things we're trying to achieve. Okay, we won, we lost the game. Did we achieve these things? So the message is always very consistent. And I actually think that'll help you have a lot of more difficult conversations if you're coaching through the year on, oh, coach, why aren't we working on this? Well, we didn't set out to work on this. It's not age appropriate, or we're going to get to it later. It's in the plan. We just need to take the lead in steps towards it. So periodization is very, very hard, especially tactical periodization. But the simplest thing is just whatever you're trying to teach, keep true to those principles and sub-principles, and teach them over a longer period of time instead of, your small micro and, meso cycles. Try and put it in a little bit more of what your macro is. And if that's 10 months, you're winning, right? Because that's a lot of time to work with players. If it's shorter, then you're the coach, and you can trust yourself that, what you're trying to get through, can you do it in that amount of time? And if you can't, then just take a look at the plan and say, okay, well, what's the most important thing we have to get through in the time that we have?
That's brilliant. And I hope everyone listening was taking some notes there. And, I think at the club level, tactical periodization should be a non negotiable, like you said, starting at the top. And I think clubs are getting on the right track, but they're kind of doing it backwards, where they're getting all the GPS sensors first before having a plan in place. So they
Yeah.
get the technology, and then they're like, well, what do I do with all this data? And there's no model set out, and it's not universal. So they're on the right track, they're getting there, but I definitely think more education needs to be done. And honestly, I would be okay with the year round system if there was more periodization and
Yeah.
recovery involved, and then just that performance side as well. I know a lot of clubs do a great job, like Mike Whiteman at the Riverhounds Academy. They give all of their kids a 2 to 3 month off season, but during that season, they're periodizing everything, and he's working directly with the coaches, and I think more clubs need to move towards that model.
Yeah, they're definitely a leader in the space on integrating, strength and conditioning into football and making it extremely specific. I've been extremely impressed by their use of, core stability work through functional movement. It's truly impressive, and they started with the babies. Like, if anyone wants to kind of check them out, they're on the Twitter and all of those. People laugh at me for saying the Twitter. I don't know anything about social media, so apparently it's just Twitter, but I call it the Twitter. So that's an Englishism for you there, or a Scousism. But what I really think needs to be the starting point is a club has to know their identity and what they want their game model to be. And then you've got to sell it to your own coaches. I think too often, and this happens at clubs I've worked at as well, even with strong leadership, you'll go in and every coach is doing their own thing. And I think that's the bit where if it starts at the top with this is our game model identity, and you start with that semi kind of prescription, it's like, hey, this age group needs to be able to do these things at the end of the season. If you want to put your own kind of personality and you want to add some additional sub principles, let us know what they are first to make sure they fit the game model and the overall. We're not coaching kids for a year. You're responsible for them for this year, but they need to move through the system. And maybe they go to somebody else next year. So we're trying to build the blocks of this young player. So I just think more communication in the club, and definitely more assertive leadership in this is how we want to play. Yes, we have to employ individual coaches who have their own, thoughts, feelings on the game, and that's what we want. We don't want kids to learn a cookie cutter model, but we do need them to have a foundational model that is the identity of that club, because otherwise, not on transitions year to year.
I want everyone to follow up with you because I'm sure they're just like, "Oh my
I'm gonna
gosh, I
give you
wanna
another
hear more from
answer.
Sarah," and we'll have to have you on again for sure, especially when we get the in-person home studio. But where can everyone find you on the Twitter?
On the Twitter, do you know what? I'm never on it. I'm so sorry. I think I'm pretty responsive via email, and anyone can have my number. It's about sharing information. So I'm always happy to connect with people. I had a great conversation with a performance coach last week who was an assistant coach at one of our academy events, and I was just really impressed with how she managed teams. Every day she did the warm up, the activations. She did kind of the substitution warm ups, and she did, the recovery sessions as well. And I was just truly impressed by her, young coach out in North Carolina. And I learned lots from her. Like, she was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe you've reached out to me. Like, all of that is just like, that makes no sense to me. Like, I have a role that is different than your role. It's not better or higher or anything. It's just different. I want to learn from you. And I want everyone to know that that's the access point that I would love to have with everybody. Like, everybody listening to this can help me get better and give me a different way of thinking and perspective. So I'm all about sharing. My email address, that the easiest one to get me on, because it's my work one, is Sarah with a H, or an H, as America says. Sarah with a H dot Brady, Brady, at uslsoccer.com. And do you want the number, or do you put that in the show notes?
I'll
Is
put
that
it
what
in
you
the show notes, and if people
do?
reach out to you through email, they'll find you. They'll hunt you
Yeah, I
down.
mean, emails are always a little bit easier because honestly, my phone explodes every day. I have to charge my phone twice. I
Ugh,
charge it overnight, and then I charge it at lunch every day because it just never stops. So
you're
I'm pretty.
popular.
I'm definitely not popular. I think I'm just people just need things, and I'm happy to share.
I love it. Well, I'm sure people will follow up with you, and everyone, if you come to the Tampa area, if you're in the area, be sure to reach out to Sarah and get connected because they're doing great things at the USL, and I'm your biggest fan, so I'm excited to see what's next.
Nah, I'm really excited to do all the collaborative stuff. Right, we can get to certain positions and roles and become very insular and just be like, okay, well, I'm here because I know what I'm doing. The minute you do that, the minute you're losing. I think, you've always got to be open to what's new. Like, look at the research. Like, the stuff that we knew 2, 3 years ago is completely different now. It's like completely different. Like, should we have a day off the day after the game, or should we train the next day and then have, day two, game day plus two is the day off? There's so much kind of opinion and research that you can support any point you want to drive home with research, right? That's one thing people like to do. They like to positively reinforce their own points. But honestly, I think the only reason I'm in this position, and hopefully the reason I'll continue to be helpful, is because I want to stay current. And being current is talking to other people who think differently, or just have different experience. Like, it's the debate is what excites me. I think that curious minds, if you disagree or we disagree, I just want to know why. And if you're like adamant and convicted, then I want to understand what you're understanding to be that convicted. And even if I choose not to adopt it, at least I'm better informed. So I think these type of positions are a privilege because we get to connect with more people. But it's definitely not connecting with just other experts. I think that's grim, to be honest with you. I think I respect you clearly as a leader in your field and an expert in your field. But I think it's really grim if we just kind of stay here and talk in one direction. The information's got to come back. There's people who are listening to this who are, on the ground every day working with the age group athletes full time that we're talking about. They will give us so much more rich, current information than we'll get from the internet or a book.
I agree. And I think nothing beats hands on experience in the day to day.
Yeah.
And I always say, there's some high school strength and conditioning coach in the middle of America who everyone can just learn from, and they're just like crushing it. So I think that's just a good note to end on. And I appreciate you coming on the podcast and having these discussions. And everyone, I will see you on next week's episode.